If you think that medieval life was anything like knightly tales or fairground celebrations, you'd better close this book right now. Because behind the colorful myths and invented exploits lies the real daily grind. Harsh, filthy, dangerous, and humiliating. There is no valor here, no enlightenment, only constant hunger, sickness, neighborly spite, and the ever present feeling that fate itself is testing you every single day. But before you settle in comfortably, make sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm genuinely curious to see who's joined us. Now get comfortable. We're about to begin. You wake up before dawn. That is not a romantic detail, but simply a necessity, because the village has no clocks, and time is counted in pain. Pain in your bones, pain in your joints, pain in the knowledge that you must rise to live another day that promises nothing more than the previous one. The air in your small, decrepit dwelling is always damp, thick with the stench of rotting straw and ancient sweat. The ground beneath your bed, a bed in name only, a rough plank atop some bundles of discarded cloth, is cold, hard, and just uneven enough to dig into your spine, leaving you sore before your day has even begun. For all the folk tales that circle about, the world is not magical here. There are no glimmering rays of hope, no fairies in the corners, and if there are witches, they are likely only old women who cough up blood in the night and frighten the livestock. You are not a knight, nor a merchant, nor even a respectable craftsman. You are a snake charmer, or, if you want to dignify it with the village's own word, the snake master. Yet no one ever says it with admiration, more often with suspicion or outright fear. It is a dirty, dangerous profession, chosen not from ambition, but because no other doors were open. In your village, being a snake charmer is just slightly preferable to being an outcast or a corpse. You share your room, if it can be called that, with several cages improvised from old wood and rusted iron. These are your charges and your only source of income. 4 snakes, each as irritable and ungrateful as the next. You have given up on naming them, since names do nothing to soften their hissing, biting, or the way their small, black eyes track your every movement with what can only be described as loathing. Your feet touch the ground, cold, always cold. You reach for your clothes, which are little more than rags, and try to recall when you last washed them. It is a pointless exercise. Water is precious, and soap is a rumor from a richer place. You pull on your shirt, stiff with grime and sweat, and lace up your trousers, whose original color is long lost to the stains of life. Your shoes, each one a mismatched hand-me-down relic, go on last. They are hard, uncomfortable, but better than walking barefoot through the mud and filth that waits outside. As the day begins, there is no grand vision to motivate you. You are not chasing glory or riches. You are very simply trying not to starve. Every morning is a negotiation. How much hunger can you bear? How much risk will you take to survive a little longer? Outside, the village stirs to the same dull rhythm. The farmer's wife screams at her children. A pig breaks loose and is immediately chased by a pair of skinny boys, barefoot and already half covered in mud. The baker, if you can call him that, opens his door and lets out a cloud of stale, burned air. You are not welcome everywhere. There are still those who believe your snakes are cursed, that you traffic with demons or darker things. They cross themselves as you walk by, or spit, or in some cases, throw rocks, though not as many as before, not after the last one who did that was bitten and spent weeks in fever before dying with his mouth frozen in a snarl. Your life is not all snakes and spectacle. It is mud and fear and the constant awareness that any day could be your last. Death comes easily here, in the shape of illness, famine, or violence. Sometimes death is a snake in your hand, turning faster than you can move, and sometimes it is just a hunger that gnaws at your insides, never satisfied. You remember the faces of those who did not last, neighbors, acquaintances, even family. The earth takes them back quickly, and the village forgets them just as fast. Yet you persist. Every day is a repetition, but it is also a small act of defiance. You force yourself to stand, to tend to your snakes, to make yourself visible in a world that does not want to see you. Maybe, you tell yourself, it will be different one day. Maybe the pain will fade, or the villagers will forget to be afraid. But you know the truth, nothing changes here. The days are gray, the mud is eternal, and your place in the world is written in the lines of your hands, calloused, bitten, scarred, and still reaching for survival. Outside your door, the world calls, an invitation not to adventure, but to yet another round in the pitiless contest of living. The sun, weak and pale, rises over the shingled roofs and muddy lanes, casting no warmth. You breathe in the air, thick with manure, smoke, and misery, and you step into the day, a snake charmer among peasants, just another soul scrambling to endure the medieval grind. No one will sing songs of you. No one will tell your story. And yet, here you are, surviving in spite of it all. You begin your day not with hope, but with necessity. The first task is always the same, inspecting the cages, a grim roll call in which you hope for the worst, yet are never lucky enough to find it. Each snake could easily have perished in the cold night, suffocated by the damp, or more likely, eaten by a rat. Rats are as bold as they are numerous, and they have no fear of you. In truth, they are better respected than you. After all, everyone must at least acknowledge a rat. But today, you are greeted by four sets of unblinking eyes, four forked tongues flickering in silent hatred. You crouch by the first cage and squint at its occupant, a sluggish adder with a patchwork pattern of brown and gray. You check for injuries, but mostly for escape. A loose board could mean a snake lost, or worse, a snake freed in the night to terrorize the house, bringing down on you the wrath of neighbors already convinced you are cursed. Your fingers are practiced, moving with the weary precision of someone who has done this countless times and paid the price in blood and scars. You slip a crust of bread through the bars, not for the snake, but to lure away any lingering rats, and then move on. The second cage contains your oldest snake, a tired viper who has survived more winters than most men in this village. It no longer coils in warning when you approach, only lifts its head in slow, sullen acknowledgement. You wish you could feel sympathy, but your world has little space for sentimentality. You clean away a handful of droppings, swap out a dirty rag for a marginally less filthy one, and move on. The third cage is always trouble. The snake within is younger, quicker, and much less forgiving. You have learned through pain and trial to keep your hands far from the bars. Today, you notice that someone has knocked the cage askew. A brick you wedged beneath it yesterday is missing. You do not need to guess who is responsible. A neighbor's child, perhaps, or one of the older boys daring each other to tempt fate. You curse, but quietly. If you are lucky, the cage has not been tampered with enough to let the snake escape, but you still eye the corners of the room for movement. In this game, a moment's inattention could cost a hand, an eye, or your life. Finally, you check the fourth cage, a miserable garter snake that barely qualifies as dangerous. You keep it for the children, for the rare times when your act is demanded for a festival, or when the Lord's steward wants to frighten his own offspring into obedience. You wish you could afford more impressive specimens, but your last attempt ended with a lost thumb and a fever that nearly took your life. Even now, you feel the ache in the phantom flesh, the itching where nothing remains but scar. With the inspection complete, you turn to your next ritual, preparing yourself for the day. You run your hands through water so cold it feels like knives, splashing just enough on your face to scrape away the night's grime. You know you do not smell pleasant, but then neither does anyone else. The village itself is a symphony of filth, animal dung, rotting food, sweat, and death mingling in the muddy streets. You recall a story once told to you by a passing friar that in the great cities, men and women douse themselves in fragrant oils and wash daily. You wonder if he lied, or if such luxury is truly possible. Your clothes, which you fold carefully each night, are no better for your efforts. Your shirt is little more than a collection of patches sewn together, each piece a different color faded to indistinguishable gray. Your trousers sag at the knee and tighten at the waist, held together with a rope you scavenged from a broken well bucket. You take pride only in your belt, a relic handed down by your father, still sturdy and supple after so many years. On the belt hang your tools, a crooked stick for guiding snakes, a pair of battered tongs, and a bag containing what you laughingly call your medicine, mostly old herbs, and a few vials of something that smells like vinegar and tastes even worse. Breakfast is an ordeal rather than a meal. You root through your larder, such as it is, and come up with a heel of bread, already growing fuzzy with mold, and a wedge of cheese that has more in common with stone than food. You cut away the worst of the rot and chew the rest slowly, imagining for a moment that it is something better. Hunger is a constant companion, never sated, always lingering just behind your thoughts. If you are lucky, you will earn enough today to buy a little more bread, perhaps an onion or two. Meat is a dream for festival days, and those are rare indeed. Outside your window, the world stirs. You hear the lowing of cattle, the clatter of hooves on cobblestones, the distant shouting of the town crier reading another proclamation no one will bother to heed. You finish your meager meal and wrap the remains in a scrap of cloth, tucking it away for later. Your hands shake, not with fear, but with the cold and the effort of simply continuing. There is one more task before you can leave: gathering your snakes into their travel cages. Each animal has its own temperament, and you have learned to work quickly, never hesitating, never letting your guard drop. The adder slides into its basket with only a token hiss. The old viper must be coaxed, and you speak to it as you would to a tired horse, murmuring nonsense until it finally, grudgingly, allows itself to be moved. The young snake, as always, is a fight. It strikes at your gloves, biting and thrashing until you finally subdue it, sweating and swearing under your breath. When the snakes are secured, you shoulder your pack and set out. The door to your home squeals in protest, sticking on its warped hinges. You force it closed and jam a board across the frame, more for show than security. If someone wishes to rob you, there is little to steal. Stepping into the muddy lane, you are met by a gust of cold wind. The sky is gray, promising rain by afternoon. You join the trickle of villagers making their way toward the center of town, each face as grim and tired as your own. No one greets you, but you are used to that. The world is not friendly to snake charmers, or to anyone really. Life is a grim contest, and everyone plays for themselves. As you walk, you feel the weight of the day settle upon your shoulders. The pack is heavy, the snakes restless. Every step is a reminder of all the things you lack: warmth, comfort, safety, respect. But you move forward, because to stop is to admit defeat, and you are not ready to surrender. Not today, not yet. You march through the filth and the fog, a figure upright even among the desperate. The path ahead is uncertain, the risks many, but you grit your teeth and press on. After all, the snakes must be fed, and so must you. There is nothing left but to endure. Your breakfast is an ordeal best described as a ritual humiliation. There is no bounty here, no warm porridge nor honeyed milk. There is only what remains from yesterday's market, and even that is a gamble between hunger and sickness. This morning, you are lucky, if one can call it luck, to find a small hunk of bread, so hard it could serve as a weapon in less peaceful times. It is flecked with blue and green, the mold thriving more than you are. Still, you scrape away what you can with a dull knife, an heirloom of sorts, though you suspect its previous owner would weep to see it so misused. You do not bother to remove the crust, for that is the only part that seems remotely edible. Alongside the bread, you find a piece of cheese, its color somewhere between yellow and gray, with a smell sharp enough to sting your nose and make your eyes water. You weigh the risks. If you eat it, there is a good chance your stomach will turn on you by midday, but the alternative is to spend the morning with gnawing emptiness in your gut. Hunger wins, as it always does. You cut away the thickest veins of mold and pop the piece into your mouth. It is hard, sour, and clings to your teeth like guilt. To wash it down, you have water, if it can be called that. It is drawn from the well at the edge of the village, which is more mud than water at this time of year, and there is always the faint aftertaste of something metallic. You drink anyway, grateful for the cold, which at least numbs your tongue to the flavors lurking in the cup. Sometimes you imagine what it would be like to taste clear water, fresh from a mountain stream, but these dreams are as distant as the nearest city and twice as unlikely. The room is small and dark, its single window so filthy that only the vaguest hints of daylight filter through. You eat in silence, listening to the sounds of the village as it comes alive. Somewhere, a dog barks, a lean, miserable creature whose ribs stand out in sharp relief. A baby cries, the thin wail muffled by thick walls and exhaustion. You hear the butcher shouting at his apprentice, the baker cursing the oven, the distant clang of a blacksmith already at work. These are the rhythms of life, relentless and unchanging. After you finish, you pick the crumbs from your lap and gather what remains. You dare not waste a morsel, for you do not know when you will next eat. If you are fortunate, today's show will draw us a crowd and a few coins will fall your way. If not, you will return home with nothing but your anger and the certainty that tomorrow's breakfast will be even leaner. Your hands, always grimy no matter how much you wash them, search the room for something to carry with you. You find a small cloth, once white, now a muddy brown, and tie the remnants of bread and cheese within it. This is you tuck into your pack, along with a battered tin cup and your tools, if one can be generous enough to use that word, for your collection of sticks, hooks, and tongs, each more worn and bent than the last. You pause before the cages. The snakes are awake now, restless from the commotion. You watch them for a moment, studying their movements. Each one is a risk, a danger you have chosen because the world offered no safer path. You check the lids, the knots and the ropes, and the makeshift locks. You know from bitter experience that a single moment's negligence could lead to disaster. The memory of that day is always close. A bite, the sudden, fiery pain, the swelling, the days of fever and hallucination. The village healer came, shook her head, and muttered prayers, expecting to return and find your corpse. But you lived, and that is both your curse and your claim to fame. Breakfast is finished. You have eaten. You have survived another morning. It is time to face the world, or at least the tiny, filthy corner of it that calls itself your home. Before you leave, you glance in a shard of polished metal nailed to the wall, your only mirror. What looks back at you is a face carved from hunger and worry, cheeks hollow, eyes ringed with darkness, lips cracked and pale. There is no beauty here, but you have long since stopped caring. Beauty is for those who can afford it. With a deep breath, you shoulder your pack and gather your baskets. Each one contains a snake secured with ropes and prayers. You tuck your stick into your belt, check your pouch for coins, empty as usual, and step outside. The morning is cold, a biting wind cutting through your threadbare clothing. The street is already thick with mud, churned by the passage of carts and livestock. You tread carefully, remembering the time you slipped and nearly lost a snake in the gutter, a mistake you paid for with a week's worth of bruises and jeers from the townsfolk. They still remember, of course. They remember everything. You walk past the rows of low, thatched huts, their walls sagging under the weight of too many winters. Smoke curls from the chimneys, but the smell is more burning dung than wood. You pass the blacksmith's forge, its fire barely visible through the haze. The smith, a massive man with hands like shovels, nods to you, not out of respect, but because he knows you are too poor to bother robbing. Further on, the baker's boy throws a rock in your direction, not with malice, but out of boredom. You ignore him. There are worse things than stones. You pause at the well, its stones slick with moss and age. You fill your cup and drink again, despite the flavor. Nearby, women scrub clothes in icy water, their faces pinched with cold and frustration. They glance at you and whisper. You know what they say, that you are cursed, that you bring trouble, that the snakes will turn on you one day and save them the trouble of dealing with you. Perhaps they are right, but you continue on, because there is nothing else to do. You cannot farm. Your hands are too scarred for fine work, and no guild would have you. The road to the market square is short, but feels endless. Each step is a reminder of how small your world is, how tightly you are bound to it. When you reach the square, the day has properly begun. The stalls are open, though there is little to sell. The butcher's wares are mostly bones and gristle. The fishmonger's catch is thin and pale. The vegetable seller's baskets are filled with wilted greens and shriveled roots. You take your place at the edge of the square, near the stocks where yesterday's thief still sits, shivering and spitting curses. You set down your baskets, uncoil your rope, and prepare for the day's work. The crowd ignores you at first, their eyes sliding past as if you are part of the scenery. But they will come. They always do. For all their fear and disdain, there is something about your snakes that draws them, something that speaks to the darkness and desperation at the heart of this place. You look up at the sky, gray and unyielding. You wonder if the sun will break through today, but you do not hope for it. Hope is a luxury, and you have learned to live without it. Instead, you focus on what must be done, survive, endure, perform. The day has begun, and there is no turning back. The snakes are never happy to see you. That is the truth of your trade, more honest than any prayer offered in the chill darkness of the village chapel. As you kneel by their cages, the floor biting into your knees, you recognize in their gaze the same calculation you see in the eyes of beggars and street children. You are the enemy, the unpredictable force that shapes their lives for better or worse. And just as the village holds you at arm's length, so too do the snakes. This, at least, feels fair. You begin, as always, with the oldest, a dull eyed viper coiled in the shadowed corner of its crate. You call it the old widow, not out of affection, but out of habit. It has survived more winters than any living thing in your room, and perhaps more than you. Its scales are cracked and patchy, its breathing slow and laborious. You prod the creature gently with a stick, just to be sure it still lives. The answer comes in the form of a slow, wary tongue flicker. You nod, satisfied enough. Next is the adder, the most irritable of your collection. Its cage, an old wooden box reinforced with iron nails, still bears the scar where it once chewed through a soft spot, escaping into your blankets and sending you stumbling out into the night. You remember the neighbors' faces as you stood in the lane in nothing but your shirt, clutching a broom and screaming curses while they laughed from the safety of their doors. Now, every board is double nailed, every crack plugged with wax and resin. Even so, you check each inch for signs of gnawing or rot, running your fingers along the rough edges and pressing gently where the wood feels softest. Satisfied, you use a pair of tongs to lift the snake, letting it dangle for a moment while you inspect its belly for injury or infestation. The adder hisses, but you are used to this song. You place it carefully into a smaller basket lined with rags, a pitiful excuse for comfort, but the best you can offer. The third snake is the worst. Young, lean, and mean, it has never been tamed. You do not bother with names. To name it would be to pretend you control it. You do not. You open the lid with your stick, keeping your hands as far away as possible, and watch as the snake thrashes in a frenzy of indignation. It has not yet learned that resistance is useless. You sympathize in your way. After a long moment, you coax it into a sack with quick, practiced movements. Even so, it manages a strike, its jaws snapping shut just inches from your fingers. You flinch and curse, and then the sack is tied shut and the danger passes. For now, finally, you come to the last, the garter snake, the one even children are allowed to touch if their parents are feeling brave. It is small, drab, and so sluggish in the cold that it barely moves as you lift it. You almost feel sorry for it, but pity is a dangerous indulgence. You slip the snake into a basket and snap the lid closed. This one, at least, will not be the death of you. With the snakes secured, you set about cleaning their cages. This is the worst part of the morning, but it must be done. The stench is overwhelming, a bitter blend of rot, feces, and something sour that clings to your hands no matter how hard you scrub. You use a fistful of straw, tossing it in the gutter when you are done, and pour a cup of precious water over the boards to wash away the worst of it. The water runs black and stinking out into the street, where it mingles with the filth already present. No one will notice. The cages are left open to air out while you check your supplies. You have a few rags, a small jar of ointment for bites, though you know it does little good, truth be told, and a length of rope for demonstrations. You count your coins, a pitiful stack of copper pennies, and tuck them into the deepest pocket of your shirt. These will have to last until market day, when you hope for a crowd generous enough to give you a few more. Before you leave, you take stock of your own body, as if it too is another reluctant beast to be managed. Your hands are covered in old scars, some fresh and angry, others pale and raised. Your arms ache from yesterday's exertions, and your back is a map of knots and pains. There is a wound on your shin, not quite healed, that you dab with ointment before wrapping it in a strip of cloth. You do not complain, for who would listen? Pain is part of the bargain, a constant tax paid to the world for the privilege of continuing to exist. As you gather the snakes into their travel containers, you offer a muttered word to each, not a prayer, but something more like a warning. Behave today. No biting. Stay put, and we will both see another sunrise. The snakes do not understand, but the ritual comforts you. It makes the day feel manageable, as if you have some measure of control. At last, you sling your pack over your shoulder, tuck your stick through your belt, and take one final look around the room. It is not much. 4 walls, a cot, a table, the cages, but it is yours. That counts for something, even if it is only a small thing. Stepping outside, you are hit by a wave of sound and smell. The village is awake, and so too is the day's business of survival. Carts creak by, their wheels groaning in the ruts of the muddy lane. Women shout at children, dogs bark, chasing rats along the gutters. The air is thick with smoke from dozens of chimneys, each one burning whatever scraps can be found. Wood, dung, straw, anything to keep the cold at bay. You breathe deeply and regret it immediately. You join the flow of bodies moving toward the market square. Each person wears the same look, eyes narrowed against the wind, shoulders hunched in anticipation of disappointment. No one speaks to you, but you are used to that. You are part of the scenery, something to be avoided or ignored. That suits you fine. You check the cages once more as you walk, feeling the weight of each snake, the shift of scales against wood and cloth. You whisper a final warning under your breath. No heroics today. The snakes, silent and sullen, offer no reply. The sun, such as it is, has climbed above the rooftops, shedding a thin, watery light over the village. It will not last. You move faster, eager to reach the square before the good spots are taken. With each step, the burden on your shoulders grows heavier, not just from the pack and the snakes, but from the knowledge that today will be much like yesterday, and tomorrow will be no better. Survival is a dull business, repetitive and relentless. Yet as you round the corner and the market comes into view, you feel a flicker of something close to determination. Perhaps today the snakes will behave. Perhaps today the crowd will be generous. Perhaps today you will make it through with all your fingers intact. It is not hope exactly, but it is enough to keep you moving. You take your place at the edge of the square, set down your baskets, and prepare for the work ahead. The day has truly begun, and with it, the delicate dance between hunger, danger, and the ever present struggle to endure. You step out into the lane, clutching the heavy basket in one hand and a battered stick in the other. The world outside your home is not welcoming. The mud sucks at your feet, and last night's rain has pooled in every rut and hollow. You pick your way between the puddles as best you can, but it is only a matter of time before your shoes, already thin and cracked, let the damp seep through to your skin. It is a small discomfort, one of many, but it still grates. The cold, clammy feeling of wet socks will follow you for hours. The morning air is thick with the smells of the village: rotting cabbage, smoke from half damp fires, the acrid tang of urine. Carts rumble past, their wheels groaning under impossible burdens. You sidestep a cow's fresh dung and nearly trip over a sleeping dog who looks up with bleary eyes, grumbles, and then goes back to his dreams. Chickens scatter as you walk, flapping and clucking in a chorus of alarm. Children dart in and out of the crowd, their laughter more shrill than joyful, their faces already streaked with grime. No one greets you as you walk. In the narrow lane, people make space for you, but only in the way that they might make space for a leper or a madman. Mothers tug their children close, men avert their gaze, and a few old women cross themselves, muttering words you cannot quite hear. You know what they say. There are whispers about your snakes, about what you must have done to earn their company, about the deals you might have struck with spirits or devils, about how one day you will pay the price for your unnatural trade. Some claim to have seen you talking to the moon. Others insist they heard you chanting curses when a neighbor's cow dropped dead last autumn. You have tried to ignore these rumors, but they cling to you like the mud, never quite washed away. You pass by the tanner's workshop, where strips of flesh hang from wooden racks, turning the air sour and thick. The tanner himself nods at you, a rare gesture, but you know better than to trust it. He, too, is an outsider, his trade marked by filth and necessity. There is a silent kinship in being unwelcome, but it offers no comfort. If the crowd turned against you, he would be the first to join in. As you reach the main road, you fall into step behind a pair of peasants, their backs bent under sacks of grain. They move slowly, worn down by the same routine that shapes your days. You catch snatches of their conversation, complaints about the harvest, worries over a sick child, curses aimed at the tax collector and the distant lord who demands more each year. Their world is as small and bleak as your own, and you realize, not for the first time, that survival here is a group effort, though everyone suffers alone. A dog runs by, pursued by a group of boys wielding sticks. They shout and jeer, their faces alight with the cruel energy of youth. One of them spots you and slows, his eyes widening as he recognizes the baskets you carry. He calls something to his friends, and suddenly the pack veers toward you, curiosity outweighing fear for a brief moment. What do you have there? The boldest one asks, craning his neck to peer inside the basket. Snakes, you reply, your tone flat and uninviting. He makes a face and falls back, but another boy, smaller and dirtier, edges closer. Will you show us? Make them dance? Not for free, you say, glancing at their empty hands and threadbare clothes. You know they have nothing to offer. Still, their interest is real, and you almost feel a pang of something like pity. Almost. They follow you for a few paces, chattering and daring one another to touch the baskets. Eventually, you turn a corner and they lose interest, their attention drifting back to the fleeing dog. You are alone again, which is how you prefer it. The road widens as you approach the market. The houses here are larger, if not exactly grand. Their walls are less battered, their windows less broken. A few sport fresh whitewash, a sign of modest prosperity. The smell changes too, from the raw stench of animals and decay to the mixed aromas of cooking food, leather, and the sweet sharpness of cider. Your stomach growls at the scent of baking bread, and for a moment you allow yourself to imagine sitting down to a proper meal with real cheese and fresh butter, a mug of ale in your hand. The fantasy fades quickly, replaced by the memory of this morning's crust and the ache that never quite leaves your gut. Near the edge of the square, you pause. Here, the crowd is thicker, the noise louder. Merchants hawk their wares in hoarse voices, each more desperate than the last. Turnips! Fresh turnips, calls one, holding up a bundle that looks anything but fresh. Fish, still twitching, claims another, though the fish on his table are glassy eyed and limp. The butcher's stall displays a meager array of bones and gristle. No one has much, but everyone tries to sell what they can. You pick your spot, near enough to the stocks to draw a crowd, but not so close that you risk trouble with the bailiff or the town guard. You know your place, not at the center, never in the light, but in the margins, where the curious and the bored might linger long enough to toss you a coin. You set down your baskets and survey the crowd. There are the usual faces, the widow who sells eggs, the toothless old man who begs for scraps, the apprentice mason with hands raw from lime. The air hums with their voices, with gossip and complaint, and the thin thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, today will be different. You know better, but you respect the illusion. It is all anyone has. You kneel by your baskets, hands steady but heart thumping. The snakes rustle, sensing the change in the air. You whisper to them, not to calm them, but to calm yourself. Be still, be quiet. Let us get through this. The sun is climbing now, weak and pale, but relentless. The square fills with bodies and noise, with the push and pull of daily commerce. You brace yourself for the performance to come, for the stares and whispers, for the mixture of awe and disgust that is your constant companion. For a moment, you allow yourself to believe that you are ready. You have survived the journey. Now comes the real challenge. And so, in the heart of the medieval village, surrounded by mud and misery, by hunger and hope, you prepare to do what you must. You are the snake charmer, the outcast, the spectacle. The world does not love you, but it cannot look away. That at least is something. The market square is not a place of cheerful barter or honest prosperity. It was, more than anything, a battlefield, one fought not with swords and shields, but with sly words, desperate stares, and the sharpest weapon of all, necessity. You stand at the edge, a little apart from the main knot of stalls and wagons, as is your custom. This is both habit and strategy. Too close, and the constable will harass you for a bribe or accuse you of frightening the livestock. Too far, and no one will bother to approach, and your day's effort will be wasted. Even at this hour, the air is thick with noise, the grating call of the fishwife, the hollow cough of the flour merchant, the clatter of barrels being rolled off a cart. Every sound is tinged with urgency. People come here because they must, not because they want to. Their faces are thin, their clothes patched and stained, and their eyes constantly flicker, always searching for a bargain, a scrap, or a moment's distraction from hunger. You know this look because you wear it yourself. You set your baskets on the ground, arranging them just so. Each basket has its place, each knot and latch checked and rechecked. In this town, even a harmless garter snake could spark a panic if loosed, and you would be the one blamed for every bruise and broken bone in the aftermath. You unfurl a square of old linen, stained with the memory of too many performances, and place it at your feet. This is your stage, such as it is, a boundary between your world and theirs, and a signal to the crowd that a show is about to begin. You take a moment to survey the faces gathering nearby. There are always the children, drawn by the promise of danger and spectacle. They cluster at the edge of your patch of dirt, eyes wide, elbows sharp. Some remember you from last time or the time before, but memory is cheap in a world where hunger and cold are constants. There are men and women, too, pretending not to watch, glancing sidelong from behind baskets of turnips or hunks of bread. Most are wary, but a few are eager, gamblers, thieves, those who understand what it means to court risk. You clear your throat, more out of habit than hope. Step close if you dare, you announce, your voice rough but steady. See the serpents that have journeyed from lands far and strange, creatures to chill the blood and test the courage of even the bravest. Your patter is old, worn smooth by repetition, but it serves its purpose. You have learned that it is not enough to display the snakes. People want a story, even if they do not believe it, especially when it distracts them from their own misery. The children inch forward, daring one another with nervous giggles. A few adults roll their eyes but do not leave. Even the bailiff, who patrols the square with the bored air of a man who cannot remember when he last saw real excitement, pauses for a moment, then moves on. You ignore him. He is dangerous in a lazy way, likely to demand a share of your earnings for protection, but not likely to care if one of your snakes escapes and sends the whole square into chaos. You crouch by the first basket, unlacing the top with careful fingers. Here is the widow, you say, lifting the tired old viper into the light. The snake is slow, its movements heavy, but it draws the attention of the crowd. You let it coil on the linen, its tongue flickering, and begin your story, half fact, half invention. You speak of deserts and far off kingdoms, of snake charmers who could calm the deadliest beasts with a single note. The children gape, the adults murmur, and you can almost feel the tension ease for a heartbeat. But the spell is fragile. A voice calls out, "Prove it then, make it dance," and the crowd snickers. You suppress a sigh. You know better than to argue. You take up your stick and tap it rhythmically on the ground. The widow does not dance. It is too old, too tired, and besides, you have never really believed the old stories yourself, but you coax it into a slow, sinuous motion, and for a moment, that is enough. The crowd leans in, fascinated and repelled. Coins begin to clink into your cup, slowly, uncertainly. The children beg their mothers for pennies. The men nudge one another, whispering bets on whether you will be bitten before the show is over. You keep your smile fixed, though it never reaches your eyes. You know how quickly their mood can change. You move on to the next snake, the adder, sleek and irritable, more lively than the widow. This one you handle with the tongs, careful to keep its head angled away from your hand. The crowd loves this part, the tension as you balance the basket, and the snake writhes in protest. A gasp rises as the adder strikes at the air, jaws snapping shut just short of your fingers. You let the drama play out, every movement calculated to hold their gaze. A few in the crowd are not amused. You see the baker's wife whispering to her neighbor, her lips twisted in a sneer. You do not need to hear the words to know what she says. Witchcraft, bad luck, snakes bring plague. You have heard it all before, and it has cost you dearly in the past. A thrown stone, a smashed window, a broken nose. But the crowd is hungry for spectacle, and today, at least, that hunger works in your favor. You end the show with the garter snake, letting a brave child touch its scales while you hold the creature's head just out of reach. Laughter bubbles up, genuine for once, and a few more coins find their way into your cup. You bow, another bit of theater, more habit than pride, and begin to pack away your snakes. As you work, the crowd drifts away. Some offer thanks, most offer nothing, and a few throw glances heavy with suspicion. The children linger longest, their faces bright with the thrill of having touched something forbidden. You watch them go with a mixture of envy and relief. They are free, for now, of the burdens you carry. Soon enough, the world will claim them too. You gather your things and sit back on your heels, counting the coins with careful fingers. It is not much, but it will keep you fed for another day, maybe two if you are careful. You tuck the money into your deepest pocket, glance at the sky, and wonder if the rain will hold off until nightfall. Around you, the square churns on. The wheel turns, grinding everyone down in its slow, merciless way. But for one brief hour, you have held the crowd, reminded them and yourself that there is still a little wonder in the world, even if it stinks of mud and fear. You rise, your knees stiff, and prepare for whatever comes next. There will be other performances, other markets, other days to survive. For now, you are simply tired and alive. In a world like this, that is more than enough. If there is one truth about your place in the market, it is that you are never truly welcome, only tolerated. The show is not for your glory, nor the crowd's delight, but for their need to be distracted from the unending march of tedium, filth, and hunger. Today's crowd, like all others, gathers with that special medieval blend of curiosity and suspicion, and you feel their eyes crawling over you with more interest than kindness. It is always the same. You are here to take their minds off their own misery, if only for the span of a song or a scream. You begin, as always, with the ritualistic patter. You speak louder than you feel, letting your words echo between the stone walls, pitching your voice so it rides above the din of the market. Come close, see the wonders the world keeps hidden. Snakes of every stripe, creatures both feared and misunderstood. What you see today may never be seen again. You gesture grandly, though there is nothing grand about your attire or your baskets. Children giggle, mothers hiss warnings, men watch with folded arms. You set down the garter snake first, the safe one, letting it coil and slide across your battered linen. The children's eyes widen. One girl asks if she can touch. You allow it, gently guiding her hand, careful to keep your own fingers close enough to intervene. Her mother pulls her away before her fingertips even brush the scales, and the crowd gives a little gasp of relief, as if they have been spared something unspeakable. You let the moment stretch, spinning tales, some true, most invented, about snake magic, about the hidden wisdom of serpents, about how, in some faraway land, snakes are worshipped as gods. No one believes you, but belief is not the point. What matters is the suspension of disbelief, the thin veil between terror and awe. Next comes the adder, the crowd's favorite. Its pattern is striking, its eyes bright, and it radiates a sullen anger. You handle it with your stick and tongs, moving slowly, drawing out the tension until the audience cannot help but lean forward. The adder thrashes, snapping at the air. You jump back dramatically, part showman, part survivor, and the crowd breaks into nervous laughter, relief blooming where a moment ago there was only dread. You see coins flicker in the cup. Not many, but enough to matter. Some people are generous because they enjoy the show. Others pay out of superstition, perhaps hoping their offering will keep the snake master from bringing bad luck upon them. You take what you can get. Not everyone is charmed, of course. A sour faced butcher calls out, "Do something useful. Get rid of the rats, not show off your monsters." His friends snicker. The jeers sting, but you are long used to this. You offer a polite bow, as if he has just paid you a compliment, and move on. The snakes hiss, catching the tension. You are careful not to let your own fear show, for in this business, fear is a currency that you cannot afford to spend. You produce the old widow for the final act. She is sluggish in the cold and barely stirs as you coax her from the basket. Some of the audience look disappointed, others lean in closer, drawn by the promise of something dangerous. You begin a story about how the widow once bit a lord's son, sending him into a fever dream for a fortnight before he miraculously survived. You change the location and victim depending on the crowd, for every village has a tale of someone brought low by snakebite, and every audience likes to think the story is their own. The sun creeps higher, though it never fully breaks through the haze. The market continues around you, vendors hawking turnips, a dog barking at the edge of the crowd, the sound of iron striking iron from the blacksmith's stall. People come and go. Some are entertained, some only wish to see you fail, and a few simply want an excuse to spit at your feet and call you a fool. This, too, is routine. After a while, the children drift away, called by their mothers or distracted by some new commotion at the far end of the square. The grown-ups return to their business, but a few linger. One woman drops a penny into your cup and whispers, "For luck." You do not know if she means to bring you luck or to ward you away, but you nod your thanks all the same. You collect your snakes one by one, tucking them back into their baskets. Your hands shake a little as you secure the lids. The adrenaline always leaves you tired, sometimes even trembling. You check your takings. It is not much, just enough for bread and maybe a bit of cheese if the market is kind. You think, with bitter irony, that the only thing thinner than your profits is the patience of the crowd. As you gather your things, a small group of older boys edges closer. They wear the look of troublemakers, bare feet, dirty tunics, eyes that have already seen too much of the world's worst. "Bet you're not even scared," the tallest one says, a sneer twisting his mouth. "Scared of what?" you reply, not bothering to look up. He kicks at your baskets. "The snakes. Bet they bite you all the time." "Sometimes," you admit, "but not today." He looks disappointed, as if he was hoping for a show of pain. You sigh. "Go on. Find something else to torment." They melt away, half disappointed, half respectful. You have seen the same pattern countless times. For some, your work is a spectacle. For others, a reminder that fear is part of daily life. Most, though, simply do not care. The world is too full of its own troubles to waste much thought on the likes of you. You rise, knees cracking, and brush the dust from your trousers. The show is over, but the day is far from done. Now comes the more difficult part. surviving the hours between the performance and the night. When you return to your hovel and count the cost of another day lived and another set of dangers barely avoided. As you move off, the crowd reforms, erasing all trace of your presence as if you were never there at all. Only the faint outline of your linen square remains, quickly trampled into the mud. You sling your baskets over your shoulder and begin the walk back through the market, feeling the familiar weight settle onto your shoulders once again. There is no applause, no curtain call, no lingering sense of triumph. Only the nagging sense that you have managed to survive another encounter with the world, a world that neither needs nor welcomes you, but can not quite bring itself to turn away. You disappear into the crowd, one more ghost among many, as the sun struggles behind a curtain of gray and the day continues its slow, grinding march toward night. Being a snake charmer is not a calling, and certainly not a destiny. It is, if anything, a symptom, a visible marker that you have fallen through all the cracks that society can offer and landed miraculously or miserably at the bottom. You have no illusions about what you are. There are no banners for you, no admiring crowds, and certainly no legacy to leave behind. What you do is not magic, nor is it respected as art. It is simply a tolerated form of survival, one step above outright begging, and several steps below even the most despised craftsman. Yet you persist, because the alternative is silence, hunger, and an anonymous grave in the mud behind the chapel. After the performance, you keep your head down. You know better than to expect thanks, and you have learned to avoid drawing attention once the show is done. The same people who cheered and gasped minutes ago now avert their eyes, as if ashamed to have been entertained by your presence. You are left alone, standing in the growing shadow of the market stalls, your hands stiff with cold and tension. You count the coins, such as they are, coppers, dulled by age and worn smooth by countless desperate fingers. They clink softly in your palm, a hollow, mocking sound. You try not to think about how few meals they will buy. You take a moment to watch the other performers at the edge of the square. There is a juggler, his hands quick and sure, his voice raised in a ceaseless stream of patter. He draws laughter from the children, and even the grown men crack a smile now and then. Not far away, a pair of acrobats perform their routine, lean bodies twisting and tumbling, their faces painted with a cheerfulness that is far more convincing than anything you could muster. Even the old storyteller, with her toothless grin and sack of riddles, gathers a larger crowd than you do. You feel not jealousy, but a dull sense of confirmation. You are not, and never will be, one of them. Theirs is a different kind of struggle, one with an audience that, however briefly, wishes them well. Your own audience comes not for joy, but for something darker, a brush with danger, a taste of the forbidden. They come to see if you will be bitten, or if one of your snakes will break free and sow panic among the crowd. You know this, and you play your part as best you can, all the while hoping no disaster befalls you or anyone else. You know too well that your life, already precarious, could be ended by a single misstep. A child bitten, a merchant's wife fainting in fear, a guard's temper flaring in the wrong moment. Sometimes you wonder what it would be like to have another role in the market. Perhaps the blacksmith, his hands huge and scarred, but respected for their strength. Or the midwife, feared in her own way but needed, and thus tolerated. Even the beggar has a place, the regulars who know each other by name and share what little they have. But you are always just outside, never quite belonging. You pack your things methodically, working in silence as the crowd dissipates. Your snakes go back into their cages, their sullen silence matching your own mood. You are always careful, always alert for danger. You have heard stories of performers bitten in the street, left to die while the crowd watches or flees. There are rumors, always whispered, of snake charmers who disappear, vanished in the night, their cages found empty, and their few possessions scattered. You wonder at times if these stories are warnings or invitations. As you walk away from the market, you pass the juggler and offer a nod. He nods back, his eyes tired. You both know the rules. Keep moving, keep your head down, trust no one and nothing. The acrobats are packing up, arguing quietly over a dropped coin. The storyteller sits on her stool, rubbing her knees and humming to herself. You envy none of them, but you recognize a kinship, the solidarity of those who exist at the edge, forever balancing between subsistence and disaster. You take the long way home, avoiding the busiest streets. The village is small, but the alleys twist and turn, offering shadows and solitude. You pass the butcher, who grunts but does not greet you. You pass the baker, who glances up and then away, as if embarrassed to acknowledge your existence. You step aside for the tanner, his apron stained and his eyes red rimmed from fumes. None of these people will ever call you friend. Children trail after you for a while, whispering and laughing, daring one another to touch your baskets. You ignore them, and they soon grow bored, darting off in search of easier prey. You feel their eyes on your back, though, and you remember being that young, when danger was a game and pain was something that happened to other people. At last, you reach your door. The wood is warped and split, the hinges rusted and creaking. You slip inside, closing the world out with a final effort. The air inside is colder than outside, heavy with the lingering scent of snakes and the mustiness of old straw. You set your baskets down and sink onto your cot, your whole body aching. You are not a magician, nor a hero, nor even a villain. You are a function, a necessity, a piece of the machinery that keeps the world spinning in its miserable rut. Tomorrow, you will do it all again. Tonight, you will count your coins, nurse your wounds, and hope that neither your snakes nor your neighbors decide you have outlived your usefulness. There are moments, as you lie in the half darkness, when you wonder what it would be like to be missed if you were gone. But the village would carry on, unchanged, indifferent to your fate. The mud would swallow your footprints, and the market square would host a new distraction, a new performer to take your place. This is what it means to be a snake charmer. You are not a magician. You are not an artist. You are at best a cautionary tale. At worst, you are nothing at all. Night comes early in your part of the world. The gray daylight is short, and before you can truly settle into any sense of accomplishment, or at least relief, the village sinks back into darkness. As the sun slinks below the horizon, you are left once more with the same question that haunts every evening. Why continue this grim charade? Why not set the snakes free and yourself with them? But you know the answer even before the thought fully forms. You survive because that is all there is to do. Your home is as unwelcoming by candlelight as it is by day. The flame flickers, casting wavering shadows over the lumpy straw mattress, the battered table, the walls mottled with stains that never fade. Every sound is amplified in the dark, the scuttle of a mouse, the soft rasp of snake scales on wood, your own breathing, slow and heavy. It would be easier, so much easier, to surrender to despair, to give in to the fatigue that weighs down your limbs, to simply stop resisting the tide of hardship and fear. But that, too, is a kind of death, and you are not yet ready for the grave. Instead, you begin your nightly routine with grim resolve. The snakes must be checked, always, without fail. You kneel beside their cages, fingers aching with cold and exhaustion, and peer in by the wavering candlelight. The old widow lies coiled, unmoving but alive. The adder stares balefully at you, every inch of its body tensed for violence. The young snake rattles restlessly, hungry and frustrated. Even the garter snake, for all its harmlessness, is a reminder that danger can take many shapes. You do not speak to them, not tonight. Sometimes you do, out of boredom or habit, muttering curses or nonsense or half remembered lullabies. But tonight, you are silent, focusing instead on the careful work of securing the cages, double checking each knot and latch. The memory of past escapes is always close, a cold warning that one moment of carelessness can ruin you. There is no forgiveness in this life, only consequences. With the snakes safe, if not content, you turn to your own small comforts. You dig into your pouch, counting the coins again by the candle's sputter. The sum is paltry, enough for bread, perhaps a cup of cheap wine, if the merchant is feeling generous. You think of those who claim that money cannot buy happiness and wonder if they have ever truly been poor. For you, a handful of coins means another day above ground, another day of not starving, not freezing, not dying alone and forgotten. Tonight, you eat your dinner in silence, a crust of bread, tough as leather, dipped into a cup of thin broth you managed to trade for a copper coin. There is no pleasure in it, but it fills your belly enough to stave off hunger until morning. You chew slowly, jaw aching, eyes fixed on the flicker of the candle. Every bite is a small act of rebellion, a refusal to disappear. Your mind wanders, as it often does in the quiet. You remember moments when you almost chose differently, when you might have run away to another town, tried to join a band of traveling performers, or even left the snakes behind and thrown yourself on the mercy of some distant lord or church. Each time, the fantasy collapses under the weight of reality. There is no place for someone like you elsewhere, no skill that would be valued, no face that would be welcomed. Here, at least, you are known, even if only as a warning. You wonder sometimes how the snakes perceive you. Are you a master, a jailer, or merely a fellow prisoner? You keep them alive, feed them as best you can, keep them safe from curious children and hungry rats. Yet you control them only because you must. If you opened the cages, what would they do? Slip away into the night, or turn on you with the same cold fury you have seen so many times. The choice, it seems, is the same for you: to fight, to control, or to surrender. But tonight, you choose, as always, to persist. To do otherwise would be to let the world win. You light another candle, patch your shirt with a sliver of fabric scavenged from an old sack, and check the door's lock twice before you lie down. The air is cold, and your body aches in too many places to count, but you are still here. Tomorrow you will rise and do it all again. As you drift towards sleep, you tell yourself that persistence is its own kind of victory. There are no songs for the snake charmer, no tales told by the fire, but you have outlasted those who once mocked you. Every day is a contest. You against the world, you against hunger and fear, you against the temptation to give up and let the snakes take over. And for one more day, at least, you have won. Sleep comes slowly, full of restless dreams. You dream of snakes, always snakes, twisting through your fingers, biting and hissing, and sometimes, strangely, speaking in voices you almost recognize. You dream of the market, the jeering faces, the handful of coins that grow lighter each time you count them. You dream of being watched, judged, weighed, and found wanting. When you wake, the darkness is thick, and for a moment you do not know if it is night or the end of all things. Then you hear the familiar sounds, the creak of the house settling, the wind sighing through the cracks, the distant barking of a dog. You are still here. The world, for all its indifference, has not yet shrugged you off. You sit up, rub your eyes, and reach for the first of your morning tasks. There is no heroism in it, no secret meaning. It is simply what you do: endure, persist, survive. Control the snakes or be controlled by them. There is no other way. The coins, when you count them by the dying candlelight, are an insult rather than a comfort. You turn each one over in your palm, feeling the worn edges and greasy surfaces, relics of hundreds of other hands, none of which were cleaner or softer than your own. Copper, mostly, and not enough of it. Occasionally, a silver coin appears in your collection, but never for long. Those are whisked away almost as soon as they arrive, claimed by rent, taxes, or, on especially desperate days, the local bailiff who always seems to find a reason to collect fines. Tonight, you count out 12 coppers and 3 battered pennies. It is the sum of your worth in this world, and it does not amount to much. You hide the coins carefully, tucking them beneath a loose board under your straw mattress. It is a pointless precaution. If someone wanted to rob you, they would find them. But habit is a kind of comfort. You have heard too many stories of men knifed for a single coin, of women beaten for a crust of bread. The village is not a place of neighborly affection. It is a place where hunger sharpens every glance and thins every excuse for mercy. After the coins, there are other treasures to be inventoried: a stub of candle, a sliver of lard, a cracked cup, 2 onions gone soft in the center, and a shriveled apple with a wormhole that you will cut around. These things are precious, not because they are rare, but because they are yours, and because losing any of them would make tomorrow measurably harder. Tonight's meal is the same as last night's: a crust of bread, soaked in whatever broth or drippings you could scrounge from the market's end. The bread is hard, but you chew it slowly, savoring what little flavor remains. Hunger is not something you defeat, it is something you manage. You eat enough to keep your hands steady and your mind clear, but never enough to feel satisfied. To be full here is a memory reserved for the very young and the very rich. There are rumors, of course, of those who feast every night: merchants, clergy, even the Lord's household. You have glimpsed the smoke from their kitchens, smelled the roasting meats on festival days. But those are lives lived at a distance, separated by stone walls, armed guards, and the certainty that hunger will never trouble them. For the rest of you, hunger is the most reliable companion, always waiting at the edges of your existence. The town itself is not much better. At night, the market is emptied of its brief chaos and reduced to a collection of rubbish and broken dreams. Rats scurry in the gutters, bold and fat from the scraps left behind. You hear their squeaking as you settle in, and you remember to place your bread high above the floor. More than once, you have woken to find a rat gnawing through your bag, its eyes as hungry and determined as your own. As you prepare for sleep, you think about the other ways people make ends meet. The baker's daughter, who sometimes sells more than bread. The old woman who deals in herbs and secrets, her shack always visited after dark. The boys who run errands for whoever will pay, never asking questions, never refusing a job. In your own way, you are not so different. You trade in spectacle and risk, in the hope that fear is worth a penny or two to those who have nothing else to give. Tonight is a lucky night. No one pounds on your door demanding payment or favors. No one throws stones or shouts curses. You are left alone, cocooned in your small patch of straw and threadbare blanket. It is not comfort, but it is safety, and that is enough. Sleep comes slowly, interrupted by the aches of a body worked too hard and fed too little. You curl around your small hoard of belongings, one arm thrown protectively over your pouch of coins. You dream uneasy dreams of snakes slipping through your fingers, of coins melting away into mud, of the crowd turning on you with pitchforks and torches. These dreams are old companions, as much a part of your life as the snakes themselves. When you wake, it is still dark, and for a moment you are not sure if it is morning or just another restless hour in the night. You listen to the familiar sounds, the wind whining under the eaves, the muffled coughs of your neighbor, the distant toll of a bell marking the hour. You rise, careful not to disturb the snakes, and pad across the cold floor to peer through the cracks in your shutter. The village sleeps on, its misery held at bay for a few more hours. You tuck your coins deeper under the mattress, tighten the cords on your baskets, and begin another day's preparations. There will be no rest, no surcease from want. Every day is a negotiation with fate, with hunger, with the caprices of the crowd. You remind yourself that you have survived worse. You recall the lean winter 2 years ago when you nearly starved, the month of fever when your only company was the burning in your veins and the faint, mocking hiss of the snakes. The time the bailiff tried to throw you out of your room for being an eyesore and only relented when his own son was bitten by a rat and you offered a remedy from your battered jar of herbs. It is never pride that keeps you going, but the stubbornness of those who have nothing left to lose. There is no glory in survival, only the unspoken agreement that you will keep going one day at a time for as long as you are able. With the first hints of dawn, you gather your belongings and brace yourself for the cold walk to the market. Your hands shake as you dress, but you force yourself to move steadily. There is no time for fear, no room for doubt. The snakes must be fed, the show must go on, and the world, gray, dirty, and indifferent, will not wait for you to find your courage. So you step out once more, coins hidden, hope rationed, and resolve as thin and persistent as the morning mist. Survival is the only act left to you, and you perform it with all the weary skill you possess. By the time the last flicker of daylight surrenders to the overwhelming gloom, your body is little more than a bundle of aches. The market has emptied, swept clean by fatigue and disappointment. Vendors trudge home with baskets lighter than they hoped, pockets never as heavy as they dreamed. You do the same, slipping through muddy alleys with your snakes and your handful of coins, holding your breath whenever you pass a group of drunken men or the barking hounds that roam the shadows in search of scraps. Here, in the deepening dark, everyone becomes a scavenger. Your room is a corner of a building that long ago surrendered any claim to respectability. The walls are half rotted, patched with boards of different ages and colors. The floor is packed earth, pitted and uneven, scattered with straw and old rags that do more to trap cold than provide comfort. In the wet season, a leak opens above your cot, and you must move the bedding several times a night, hunting for a patch of ground not yet claimed by the slow, relentless drip. Rats live in the thatch above and the stones below. Sometimes, when the wind is right, you can smell the midden heap behind the tannery 3 streets away. Yet this is home, if not by choice, then at least by endurance. You do not live alone, not really. The house is carved into rooms by rotting planks and tattered curtains, each cell inhabited by someone with no better option. On the other side of the wall, an old widow coughs herself to sleep each night, her lungs ruined by decades of smoke and damp. Above you lives a day laborer, gone before dawn and back after dusk, who rarely speaks, but sometimes sings when he thinks no one can hear. Across the hall, a family of 5 squeezes into a space barely large enough for 2. Their children squabble and cry through the night, and their arguments drift through the cracks, giving you an unasked for intimacy with their poverty. Your own space is little more than a bed, a table, a few crates, and the cages for your snakes. There is one small window, filthy with soot and rain, that lets in as much cold as light. Sometimes you plug the holes with rags or bits of old parchment, but the wind always finds a way back in. Privacy is a myth. You hear your neighbors' every word, every cough, every creak of their bed springs. In turn, they hear you, the hiss of snakes, the rattle of coins, the muttered curses as you tend to your wounds or patch your clothes. You live in a communion of desperation. The bed itself is a crude construction, just a frame of scavenged wood with a mat of straw, most of it moldering, some of it suspiciously damp. You fluff the bedding out of habit, even though it changes nothing. You wrap yourself in a thin blanket, one corner gnawed by mice, and press your back to the wall for warmth. The chill seeps in anyway. On the worst nights, you lie awake and listen to the drip drip of water, counting heartbeats to keep madness at bay. If you are lucky, you will fall asleep quickly, too exhausted to notice the cold or the pain in your limbs. If you are not, you toss and turn, haunted by the day's failures and the endless worries that stalk your thoughts. What if the snakes fall ill? What if the villagers decide they have had enough of your act? What if the rent comes due and you have nothing left to give? Every night, you replay the same questions, never finding answers. You sometimes envy the dead, though you are not yet so beaten as to wish to join them. You imagine them at peace, free from hunger and humiliation, no longer shivering in the dark or fearing the knock at the door. But then you think of the grave, the worms and the rot, the final silence. Even misery, it seems, has its comforts. You tuck your meager possessions close before you sleep. The pouch of coins, the bundle of rags, the battered knife. These are not treasures, only reminders that you still own something, that you still matter in some infinitesimal way. You keep your stick within arm's reach. More than once, you have woken to the sound of a rat, or, worse, a human thief trying the door. The stick is not much of a weapon, but sometimes, in the dark, the illusion of defense is enough to let you drift off. You have heard tales of soft beds, of pillows stuffed with feathers, of sheets washed in lavender water. You do not know if these things are real or fairy tales for the children of the rich. In your world, sleep is earned, not granted. It comes hard and never stays long. On the coldest nights, you dream of heat, of sun warmed stones, of glowing fires, of thick wool blankets pulled tight around your shoulders. You wake to find your fingers numb, your breath steaming in the air, and you wonder, for a brief moment, if you froze to death in your sleep and simply failed to notice. Still, you endure. You always endure. There is no other option. In the darkest hour, you find a kind of peace in routine. You check the cages one last time. You pull your blanket tight. You listen to the sounds of life, muffled and weary, leaking through the walls. You close your eyes and count each slow breath, hoping for morning, knowing that if it comes, it will bring nothing but another round of the same struggles. But you greet it anyway, because to stop is to lose even the paltry dignity left to you. And in this world, even a snake charmer is entitled to that much. So you sleep, or try to, nestled in squalor, surrounded by the evidence of everyone else's struggle. Tomorrow will be another day of the same mud, hunger, spectacle, and survival. But tonight, you claim your tiny corner of existence, your place in the cold and the dark, and you rest. For now, that is enough. If the snakes in your care are capricious, sullen, and sometimes dangerous, the people you encounter every day are even worse. You have long since discovered that most of your suffering comes not from fangs or venom, but from the words, gestures, and sideways glances of those who call this village home. Their malice is rarely overt, at least not when there are witnesses. Instead, it seeps into every conversation, every transaction, every awkward silence that stretches a heartbeat too long. The first challenge of each day is navigating your neighbors. Some avoid you outright, crossing the street or spitting into the dust as you pass. Others, especially the elderly, are fond of clutching their beads or muttering hurried prayers when you come too near. Children alternate between daring and dread, one day taunting you with cruel nicknames, the next hiding behind their mother's skirts, eyes wide with a mixture of horror and awe. You have grown used to being an object lesson. Eat your porridge, or the snake man will come for you. Do not go near the water, or you will end up like him. You wonder sometimes if your existence has kept more children in line than all the village elders combined. Adults are more subtle. When you approach a market stall, the butcher sharpens his cleaver with exaggerated slowness. The baker weighs your coin twice, always checking for shaved edges or hollow cores, though you are no more likely to cheat than anyone else. In fact, you are less likely. Being suspected is simply more trouble than it is worth. Still, every loaf seems a little smaller, every joint of meat trimmed a bit more closely. You accept it without argument, knowing that any protest will only confirm their worst suspicions about you. Every so often, someone will attempt a joke at your expense, a ribald comment about snakes and sin, or a pointed inquiry as to whether you sleep with your charges to keep warm at night. The laughter is never shared with you, and you have learned not to respond. Sometimes it is safer to be invisible, to fade into the background as just another piece of bad weather everyone endures. The constables are their own special torment. They are not actively cruel, at least not most of the time, but they view you as a nuisance, a potential source of trouble, best kept at arm's length. Once, when a snake escaped and made its way into the miller's cellar, the entire town turned out with sticks and stones to corner you. You were made to stand in the middle of the square while the bailiff lectured you at length about responsibility, danger, and the wrath of God. The spectacle ended only when one of your own snakes bit a mongrel dog and sent it yelping. The villagers scattered, and you were left to collect your baskets in silence. Even those who seek you out for help, usually with a rat problem, or in rare cases to see if you can curse a neighbor, do so furtively, with furtive glances and half mumbled apologies. No one wants to be seen too close to you. No one wants your misfortune to rub off. You do not blame them. You would not choose your own company either if given the choice. You try to make yourself useful whenever possible. You catch the occasional runaway animal, patch a torn roof, help haul water from the well. For your efforts, you receive a wordless nod, or rarely, a crust of bread. You are careful never to refuse, never to expect gratitude. It is safer to be overlooked than to be envied, safer to be pitied than feared. There are rare moments of kindness, as unexpected as rain in summer. Once, an old woman pressed a baked apple into your hand, muttering something about feeding the creatures. Another time, a stonemason, drunk on cheap wine, sat beside you and listened while you spoke of the snakes, how you kept them, how you learned not to be afraid. He did not remember it the next day, but for that hour you were not entirely alone. Even so, you have learned to expect nothing from your fellow villagers. Friendship is a luxury you cannot afford, and trust is a door that opens only to trouble. You watch every word, every gesture, every smile that lingers a fraction too long. If someone is kind, you wonder what they want. If they are cruel, you wonder what they fear. You keep your thoughts to yourself and your secrets even closer. When you leave the market, you walk quickly, keeping to the alleys and back lanes. Eyes follow you, but you do not look back. You have been blamed for bad harvests, for sick animals, for a stillborn child. In a world where so much is unexplained and uncontrollable, it is easier to believe that the snake charmer's shadow poisons the well than to accept that sometimes suffering simply happens. You know your place. It is at the margins, at the edge of every gathering, just within earshot, but never truly included. You are not a part of the village, not really. You are a presence, a warning, a shadow that flits through daily life, leaving just enough fear in your wake to keep people honest. Still, you persist. You make your rounds, buy your bread, tend your snakes, and keep your head down. The world is heavy with suspicion and boredom, and you, bent under the weight of both, Move quietly through it, a necessary evil, a tolerated nuisance, and nothing more. Yet, even on the worst days, you find a strange pride in your endurance. You are not loved, but you are still here. You are not welcome, but you have a place. In a world as cold and brutal as this one, even that much is a triumph. You once thought, when you were very young, that you might someday grow used to the snakes, that their hiss would become a kind of music, that the slide of their cold bodies over your skin would feel as natural as the touch of water or the caress of wind. This, like so many things, proved to be a childish fantasy. The truth is far less romantic and much more persistent. The snakes are not pets, not companions, and certainly not friends. They are an ever present danger, as necessary to your survival as they are to your sense of dread. Every morning, as you check their cages, you face the same old calculation. Each snake is a potential disaster, tightly wound beneath a fragile lid of wood and rope. There is the adder, quick and spiteful, who watches every movement you make, its tongue flickering like a curse. There's the old widow, so slow and weary you sometimes think she must finally be dying, until, with a flick of her tail or a sudden, lazy strike, she reminds you that death is always close, but never quite close enough to be merciful. Even the harmless garter snake, the one you use to amuse the children, is not to be trusted. Once, after a long, hungry week, it slipped from your hands and vanished into the shadows beneath your bed. You found it 3 days later, curled in a boot, thin and angry, ready to bite. You learned then that nothing alive, no matter how small or seemingly innocent, can be controlled forever. Not the snakes, not the villagers, and certainly not your own gnawing fear. You do not name your snakes anymore. Names are for things you hope to keep, for creatures you can afford to mourn. Here, everything is temporary. The warmth of the sun, the taste of fresh bread, even the grudging tolerance of your neighbors. Snakes die, as all things do. When one slips away, starved, sick, or frozen in the night, you bury it behind your hut, offer a muttered apology, and hope it will not return as a bad omen. The villager's attitude toward your snakes is a shifting mix of fascination and horror. They fear the venom, yes, but what they really fear is the reminder that life, in all its misery, can end in an instant. A bite, a fever, a swelling limb, death delivered not by war or famine, but by something small and easily overlooked. This is the true nature of your work, the real reason you are tolerated. You bring the villagers face to face with the inevitability of suffering, and in doing so, you absorb some measure of their fear. Sometimes a farmer will bring you a sack, tied tight at the mouth, with a struggling shape inside. Found this one in my field, he says, or the dog wouldn't stop barking at the woodpile. Always, there is an expectation, a mixture of pride and dread, that you will take it off their hands. You do, though not without reluctance. The snakes brought to you in this way are often the wildest, most unpredictable, and sometimes They are not even snakes at all. A rat, a weasel, once even a half drowned toad. You deal with them as best you can. You cannot refuse, for to do so would invite questions. What kind of snake charmer cannot manage a simple adder? What use are you if you cannot shoulder the village's unwanted burdens? So you add the new arrival to your sad collection, making a space in one of the cages, offering scraps and water, and watching warily as it adjusts to captivity. Some die quickly, unable to stand the confines of your rough wooden boxes. Others endure, growing meaner and more sullen by the day, until you wonder which of you is more trapped. Caring for snakes is a task without end or thanks. There is no routine that cannot be shattered by a sudden escape, no trick of handling that guarantees your safety. You use sticks and tongs, rags and old gloves, but none of it is foolproof. You bear the scars, tiny, round punctures, ragged slashes, swollen fingers, and once a bite that left your arm black for weeks. The villagers remember that one. They watched as your skin grew hot and slick, as you sweated and shook in your bed, as the healer came and left with a shake of her head. You survived, barely, and when you returned to the market, they eyed you with a new blend of fear and respect, as if you had returned from the dead. Yet, for all the danger, you cannot help but marvel in a small, grim way at the creatures themselves. They are perfectly suited to their world, silent, patient, merciless. There is no waste, no excess, no sentimentality. They kill because they must, survive because they can, and ask nothing more from the world than what it is willing to give. Sometimes you think the snakes are the true rulers here, the only ones honest about the terms of existence. Still, when you watch them, you cannot shake the sense that you are living on borrowed time. Each day, each performance is a gamble. Will the adder strike too soon? Will a child reach into the wrong basket? Will your tired hands fumble at the worst possible moment? There are no guarantees, only probabilities, always shifting, never kind. And so, you tend your snakes as you tend yourself, cautiously, warily, without affection, but with a kind of grim respect. They are your living, your curse, your only claim to relevance in a world that would just as soon see you gone. Their presence is a constant threat, an unavoidable reminder that survival here is never more than provisional. You lock the cages, check the knots, and tell yourself it is enough to have made it through another day. The snakes rattle and hiss behind you, and you understand, better than you care to admit, that you are not so different after all. You do not live above the law in your village, but always pushed under its boot. The constables and bailiffs are not the comic relief of village life, as some like to pretend. They are the blunt tools of authority, enforcing the will of the landlord, the magistrate, and the church in whatever order is most profitable for them that week. As the snake charmer, you learn quickly how fine the line is between tolerated curiosity and criminal suspicion. For most, the presence of law is a background noise, taxes paid in spring, the threat of stocks for drunkenness or brawling, The odd fine for selling watered down ale or short measures of flour. For you, the law is more personal. It lingers at the edges of your days, watching for any excuse to clamp down. You are a known oddity, a reminder that not every member of the community fits neatly into its ideas of decency or safety. It starts with the glances. Whenever a new constable is posted to the village, he eyes your cages with open disgust. You hear the muttering as you pass. There he goes, the snake man. Best keep your children close, lest he teach them his tricks. The threats are seldom explicit. No one wants to be caught accusing you of sorcery outright, not with the priest's sermons still ringing in their ears. But suspicion is its own kind of sentence. Every few weeks, there is a new rule or tax. Once it was a levy on performers in the market, supposedly to pay for crowd control. You paid even when you made no profit, because the alternative was confiscation, or worse, being banned outright. Another time, the bailiff demanded you prove your snakes were not foreign, not imported from some forbidden country. When you protested that they were all caught or delivered locally, he fined you for being disrespectful. You are subject to searches at random. The constable will arrive, flanked by 2 or 3 younger men, and demand to see your cages. They upend your baskets, poke at your bedding, even sniff your rags for signs of some invisible crime. One once claimed your old jar of ointment was a poison. Another insisted you must have stolen a silver spoon from the inn. Each time you stand silent, letting them tear through your few possessions, knowing that arguing will only bring more trouble. Sometimes the law is bored. On slow days, when there is no real crime, they find excuses to make your life harder. You startled a merchant's horse, one says, though you never left your patch of mud. A snake was seen near the mill, another claims, though you can account for each of your charges. You pay the fine, or barter a favor, or simply endure their threats and jests, knowing that resistance will only make you a target. Worst are the holy days. The priest preaches against unnatural creatures, and the villagers are always looking for someone to blame for the year's misfortunes, crops that failed, children who cough through the night, storms that flood the riverbanks. The bailiff knows which way the wind is blowing. He will appear at your door, flanked by stone-faced men with clubs, and suggest that it might be wise for you to keep a low profile for a week or two. This means staying away from the market, making yourself invisible. You comply because you know what happens to those who do not. There have been times, more than you care to count, when you feared for your life. When the town was struck by fever, the whispers started. The snakes carry sickness. The charmer is cursed. You spent those weeks indoors, shades drawn, clutching your stick and knife in the dark, praying that the world would forget about you before it decided to remember you as a convenient scapegoat. The law does not protect you. It does not care if you are guilty or innocent, honest or cunning, careful or reckless. The law exists to keep order, to provide the appearance of justice and the reality of obedience. You are an outsider by nature and by profession. When you succeed, you are envied. When you fail, you are despised, and yet you are needed. No one wants to admit it, but when a snake is found in the well, or a rat infestation grows too bold, the constable himself will come knocking, suddenly polite, suddenly eager for your expertise. Then, and only then, you are allowed a brief taste of respect, usually followed by another fine or a warning to keep your creatures under control. You play this game as best you can, learning to smile at threats, to nod at insults, to pay your dues and swallow your pride. You are careful never to break the rules, even the ones invented solely to trap you. You never argue with the priest, never speak ill of the magistrate, never offer advice unless it is asked for. You have seen what happens to those who forget their place. On the rare days when the market is lively and the crowd generous, you let yourself imagine a world where the law exists to protect rather than punish. But even as you count your coins and slip home under cover of dusk, you know the truth. In this world, the law is just another snake, always waiting for you to let your guard down. So you live by your own code: silence, caution, endurance. The law may never be your friend, but at least it is predictable in its cruelty. You make yourself small, you make yourself necessary, and you survive. It is not justice, but it is reality. And in the grim arithmetic of medieval life, reality is the only currency that ever matters. If there is one thing that slips through your fingers faster than coins, it is reputation. You may have endured the law, survived the daily bruising of poverty, and kept your snakes from slithering into someone else's misfortune, but nothing can prevent the slow erosion of how you are seen and how you see yourself. Reputation in the village is not built on skill or resilience. It is built on the daily whisper, the sideways glance, the communal decision about whose suffering is deserved and whose is simply bad luck. For a time, you told yourself that being the snake charmer meant you held a unique place, someone necessary, perhaps even a little feared. But as the years grind by, even that faint comfort unravels. You remember the day you found the pig's head nailed to your door, a warning from no one and everyone at once. No one met your eye as you pried it free and tossed it into the midden. No one acknowledged the act, but after that, your customers thinned. Mothers crossed the square rather than let their children watch your act. Neighbors who once traded you a crust for catching a rat now looked away as if you carried the plague in your pockets. The suspicion is constant, but it changes shape as the years pass. At first, you were a curiosity. Then you became a risk, a scapegoat for everything that went wrong: a sick cow, a spoiled barrel, a miscarriage in the next street, your own failings, moments when your hand shook or your tongue slipped, became tales told around fires, proof of your guilt. A child cut his finger on a splintered crate, must be the snake man's curse. A merchant's wife lost a baby. She must have walked past your window too late at night. There is a corrosive intimacy to being everyone's fear. It eats at you, worming through your mind until you start to believe you are at fault. On bad nights, when the ache in your bones and the rattle in your chest make you wonder if the end is close, you whisper apologies into the dark, unsure whether you are addressing the villagers or yourself. You try, sometimes, to fight back. You clean yourself as best you can before market days. You offer small kindnesses, a free trick for a hungry child, a rat killed for the price of a smile. For a day or two, the suspicion eases. Then something goes wrong. A snake escapes. A child falls ill. A fight breaks out after one of your shows. The old anxieties return, stronger than before, reinforced by the invisible glue of rumor. Your inner life grows smaller, more anxious, more brittle. You talk less, smile less, keep to yourself more. Where once you might have joined the crowd for a drink at the inn, if you could spare a coin, now you take your bread and ale to a quiet corner, your back to the wall. You watch others laughing, jostling, making bargains or boasting of luck, and you feel as if you are watching a play from behind the curtain, a character no one wants to see. What stings most are the betrayals of those few who once seemed to care. The widow who gave you apples avoids your gaze. The stonemason who once shared wine with you curses loudly when you pass. The children who used to crowd around your show now point and giggle from a safe distance, clutching their mother's hands. Even the other outsiders, beggars, itinerant tinkers, the tired old midwife, treat you as something separate, something less. All of this you try to accept. You tell yourself that it is better to be ignored than attacked, better to be feared than pitied. But each new slight chips away at the walls you have built inside yourself. There are days you feel yourself growing thin and insubstantial, less a person than a ghost haunting the village that tolerates but does not welcome you. It is not just the outside world that grows harsher. Inside, you find yourself hardening. You trust no one. You speak only when spoken to. You stop volunteering help, stop offering kindness that is never returned. Even with your snakes, your touch becomes more perfunctory, less gentle. You remind yourself, grimly, that nothing in this world is softer than a snake's belly, and nothing harder than a villager's heart. Nights are the worst. The voices in your head multiply, and you replay every slight, every insult, every rumor that trails behind you like a shadow. You imagine the crowd turning on you, first with words, then with stones. Sometimes you even see your own hand in these visions, giving them a reason, making their violence justified. You wonder if this is how all outcasts end, not with a cry for justice, but with a quiet collapse inside themselves. And yet, in the slow, gray grind of life, you still persist. It is not pride, nor hope, nor even defiance anymore. It is the small, stubborn thing at the center of you that refuses to yield, that believes, foolishly or not, that there must be some value in simply surviving, even if the world forgets your name. You have become what the village always feared, a shadow silent and patient, moving through the years without kindness, without praise, but not yet gone. Your soul aches, your body aches, your reputation has eroded to little more than a warning for others. But you wake each day, tend your snakes, gather your meager earnings, and walk the muddy lanes with your head just high enough to see the horizon. If nothing else, this is your resistance. You have not let them erase you completely. Not yet. There is a special kind of cold that settles in when you realize you are alone, not just in the practical way, but in the absolute sense that every human face around you is closed, turned away, busy surviving their own daily grind. In your earlier years as a snake charmer, you told yourself you could get used to the solitude, that it was only temporary. With time, you convinced yourself that you preferred it, that it was safer and less complicated to rely on no one but yourself and your silent, venomous companions. But the truth, worn thin and raw by the passing years, is far crueler. The longer you live this life, the fewer faces you recognize, and the fewer recognize yours with anything resembling warmth. It was not always this way. Once, in your first seasons among the villagers, you had the beginnings of friendship, or something like it. There was a woodcutter who traded jokes for help chopping kindling, and a midwife who left you bread and a little broth at your door during the worst of a fever. You remember the laughter you shared with them, brittle and uncertain, but real. For a time, even the old tinker who came through twice a year would tip his hat and swap tales of distant fairs and mishaps in foreign markets. The process of losing them was never dramatic. No one slammed doors in your face or shouted you from the street. It was a slow, weathering drift, like erosion on a stone. The woodcutter found steadier work in another village and never returned. The midwife grew afraid that sharing food with you might invite gossip about her own strange ways. The tinker stopped coming altogether, or perhaps simply died on the road, his absence unremarked. You told yourself you did not mind. You had your snakes for company, after all. Yet you began to notice how even the animals grew wary with time. A stray dog that once followed you for scraps started to bare its teeth. Cats, once content to loiter in your doorway in hopes of a rat, now slink away at your approach. Even the birds seem quieter when you pass beneath their perches. As the years went by, your circle of acquaintances shrank until it was little more than a memory. You became that shape at the edge of every gathering, the one people talked around, never to. At first, you grieved these losses quietly. Later, you let the grief harden into bitterness. At last, you let it slip away, leaving a hollow nothing where company once lived. There was once someone you almost let close, a girl with clever hands and a soft, stubborn mouth who came to watch your shows and brought wildflowers for your table. For a handful of weeks, you allowed yourself to imagine a different life. She laughed at your stories, and you let yourself believe that she saw more in you than the snakes in the dirt. When her father found out, the flowers stopped, and so did her visits. The next time you saw her, She walked past as if you were no more than a heap of stones. You never learned if she left the village or simply learned not to see you. On the rare occasion you meet someone new, a traveling monk, a lost merchant, a healer passing through, they treat you with the distant politeness reserved for the very sick or the very strange. You have learned to respond in kind, short answers, lowered eyes, a practiced humility that is really just a shield. You do not ask for names or stories because you know they will be gone before you can remember them. Sometimes you try to convince yourself that there is a freedom in this. No ties to bind you, no one to mourn, no one to betray you when rumors sour the air. You are answerable only to yourself and the living creatures in your care. There are no arguments, no debts, no heartaches. But even this, you know, is a lie you tell yourself to make the silence more bearable. There are nights, though, when the silence is too heavy, when even the snakes seem subdued by it. On those nights, you catch yourself talking aloud, telling stories to the empty room, cursing your luck, or whispering names you swore you would forget. You remember the woodcutter's deep laugh, the midwife's gentle hands, the soft defiance in the girl's eyes. You remember the ache of being seen, of mattering, if only for a little while. You wonder if anyone misses you at all. You wonder what would happen if you disappeared, if the landlord would notice the rent unpaid, if the constables would clear out your room, if the villagers would even remember your face. Sometimes you think they would be relieved. Sometimes you think no one would notice at all. You try not to linger on these thoughts. Instead, you bury yourself in routine, cleaning the cages, patching your clothes, counting your coins, practicing your stories. You let the rhythm of daily life fill the space where other people might have lived. You grow more cautious, more guarded, less inclined to trust even the smallest kindness. When a neighbor's child greets you on the street, you nod but do not smile. When a stranger offers you a drink at the market, you refuse politely and walk away. There is a comfort, bleak as it is, in knowing you can survive alone. Every day you wake, tend your snakes, and carry on is another small victory over the emptiness. Still, there are nights when you lie awake, listening to the rain rattle the thatch and the rats skitter in the dark, and you feel the weight of absence more than anything else. You tell yourself that you are strong enough to endure it, and in the morning, you prove yourself right. But deep down, you know what has been lost is not coming back. In this life, you learn that the worst pain is not the sting of venom or the bite of hunger, but the slow, unremarked fading of friendship and love. It leaves no mark on your skin, but it hollows you out just the same. The snakes remain as inevitable and indifferent as the rain, but even they cannot fill the empty space where people used to be. Hunger is not an event but a landscape, an ever present shape in the background of your days, a silent, gnawing ache that becomes as familiar as breath or pain. Some mornings, you wake with your stomach clenched so tight it feels like a knot of old rope, and you know before you even open your eyes that there will be no breakfast today, not unless fortune, always capricious, decides to spare you a coin or a crust. You have learned to plan your life around hunger, to ration your meager stores with the grim precision of someone who has nothing to spare. A heel of bread is broken into careful crumbs, each one rolled between your fingers before you dare to eat it. On rare occasions, a neighbor might throw a potato your way, or a bruised apple that was destined for the pigs. Even then, you cut away the rot and tell yourself that what remains is a treat. You remember once finding a handful of wild garlic growing near the riverbank and feeling for an entire day as if you had stolen a secret from the gods. But mostly, you live in hunger. It shapes your days, it shortens your temper, it slows your hands and clouds your mind. You feel it in the sluggishness of your movements as you gather the snakes, in the way your vision blurs when you try to count your coins, in the cold that settles more deeply in your bones every season. It becomes easy to resent those who eat their fill, and easier still to blame yourself for every empty day. The village, for all its own privations, has a pecking order, and you are always near the bottom. There is another companion as constant as hunger, sickness. The winters are long and wet, the houses are drafty, and the food is never enough to keep your strength up. Illness travels through the village with no more regard for status than the wind. Coughs echo through thin walls. Fevers come and go like ghosts. You watch, helpless, as neighbors waste away, their beds finally sold for firewood, their few coins gone to the healer or the priest. You yourself have survived sickness more times than you can count. Once, you spent nearly a fortnight shivering and burning in your bed, convinced that every breath would be your last. You watched the snakes through a haze of fever, unable to feed or care for them. When the worst had passed, you found one dead and another gone half wild with hunger. That was the winter you decided you could no longer afford sentiment. Not for the animals, not for yourself. There are no real remedies for the ills that afflict you. The healer, a grim faced woman with hands like tree roots, will offer bitter teas and stern advice. Boil your water, she says, as if you had enough fuel for such extravagance. Rest, she adds, as if rest were something that could be bought or bartered. Sometimes you trade her a snake skin or a rat carcass in exchange for a handful of herbs. You choke them down, more in hope than expectation. The market is full of old cures, powders and tonics, sold by passing merchants, charms promised to ward off chills or stomach pains. You know them all, and you know they are useless. Sickness is a fact of life, not a puzzle to be solved. You wear your coughs and sores like invisible scars, never spoken of, never shown except in the wince when you stand, or the limp in your stride. Your worst fear, unspoken, is that illness will come at a time when you are already at your lowest, when the snakes are restless, when the coins are gone, when the village has found some new reason to hate you. In those moments, you know there would be no help, no comfort, only the slow slide toward the final silence that claims so many each year. You have seen it happen, Again and again, a neighbor simply disappears, their absence noted only by the scavenging rats and the landlord eager to let out another corner of his crumbling house. Yet, for all the danger, hunger and sickness are not the worst of your burdens. They are predictable, at least. You know how to endure them, how to ignore the pangs and push through the aches. You have your routines, the small defenses you build around yourself, stretching a meal as long as you can, hoarding a root or scrap for leaner days. Keeping your hands and face as clean as water allows in the hope of fooling your body into health for a little longer. What truly weighs on you, more than the ache of an empty stomach or the burn of a fever, is the knowledge that none of this is extraordinary. Everyone you know is hungry. Everyone you meet is sick or soon will be. There is no escape, no cure, no miracle. Life in the village is a contest not of thriving, but of enduring. And most days, you count your greatest success as simply making it to nightfall. When you dream, if you dream, it is often of food, roasted meats, fresh bread, sweet apples by the basketful. Sometimes you dream of a world without pain, where you wake warm and full, where your bones do not ache and your belly does not clamor for more than you have to give. But the morning always brings you back to the truth. Another day of scraping and suffering, another day of measuring out crumbs and hoping for the strength to rise and do it all again. In the end, hunger and sickness are as much a part of your life as the snakes themselves, inescapable, inevitable, and, in their way, the only constants you can count on. You learn to live with them because you have no choice. And as you sit on your bed, shivering in the gray light, you tell yourself that tomorrow, maybe, the ache will be a little less. But deep down, you know the truth. It never really goes away. Isolation does not arrive all at once, like a sudden collapse of a rotten roof or the crash of a cart in the market square. Instead, it seeps in slowly, as inexorably as mold creeping across a wall. At first, you scarcely notice it. You tell yourself it is simply a busy season, or the weather has kept your neighbors indoors. You grow accustomed to the quiet, to the absence of laughter or conversation leaking through the thin wooden planks that make up your walls. The sound of human voices becomes a memory, like a half forgotten song, while the hiss and rustle of snakes fill up the silence. Days pass, and the routines that once tied you, however loosely, to village life fray and then snap. The constable's visits become less frequent, replaced by a lingering sense of being watched from afar. You still walk through the market, but more as a ghost than a participant. Even the children, who once taunted or dared one another to touch your baskets, now scurry away at your approach. The baker's wife no longer weighs your coin with exaggerated suspicion. She simply turns away, pretending not to see you at all. You find yourself speaking less until your own voice startles you in the dimness of your room. There is no one to hear your muttered curses when a snake escapes, or your tired jokes as you patch your clothes by the faint candlelight. The few greetings you exchange are quick, businesslike, their brevity only sharpening the sense of distance. A nod at the well, a grunt from the tanner, a murmured thanks from a housewife whose cellar you have rid of rats. Not friendship, never that. Just the brittle acknowledgement of mutual survival. Even the other outsiders avoid you now. The beggar who used to share a crust or a story with you keeps to his own corner of the alley, his eyes sliding past as if you were already dead. The healer, once willing to trade herbs for skins and stories, grows distant, always too busy, always out of whatever you need. You realize that you have become a bad omen in flesh, a walking warning that the world can be both cruel and contagious. Your world shrinks, not by choice, but by the slow, indifferent pressure of time. The four walls of your room become not just shelter, but a prison. You measure your days in small chores, feeding the snakes, counting your coins, patching your ragged clothes. On market days, you perform your act for smaller and smaller crowds, your voice echoing into emptiness. Sometimes you wonder if you have become invisible, or if the villagers simply hope you will disappear of your own accord. The snakes, at least, remain constant. They do not judge, do not whisper behind your back, do not recoil from your touch, but they offer no comfort either. Their presence is practical, transactional. They live because you keep them fed and contained, and in return, they give you a living, however meager. At night, their cages are the only signs of movement in your little room, their bodies gliding over straw and wood, as cold and indifferent as the moonlight creeping through the cracks in your shutter. You learn to make peace with silence. You stop expecting company, stop hoping for a kind word or a shared meal. You become expert at moving unseen, at fading into the background of daily life. You learn to hide your pain, to keep your coughs and limps to yourself. The less the world knows about your weakness, the safer you are. Sometimes, on rare nights when you cannot sleep, you recall what it felt like to belong, even briefly. A smile from a neighbor, a seat by the fire, a careless promise that someone would look out for you. These memories seem foreign now, like something that happened to someone else. You try to convince yourself that you do not miss them, that isolation is a kind of freedom. No one can betray you or hurt you if no one is close enough to matter. But even the hardest heart aches sometimes for recognition, for proof that you are not just a shadow passing through the world unseen. You start to wonder, in your loneliest hours, if you have become less than human, more creature than man, more legend than fact. The villagers speak of you in whispers, if at all, and you catch snatches of new stories in the wind, that the snake man never sleeps, that his touch sours milk, that his eyes can curse a child at a glance. These stories no longer anger you. They are protection as much as punishment. They keep the world at bay. They make it easier in some strange way to keep surviving. But the price is high. There are days when you forget how to smile, when your own reflection startles you. A gaunt face, eyes rimmed with shadow, mouth set in a line that never curves upward. You grow wary, not just of people, but of yourself. You police your own thoughts, scolding yourself for every flicker of hope, every wish for company or kindness. You stop telling stories to your snakes, stop humming old tunes to fill the emptiness. You begin to wonder how much of yourself has already withered away in the silence, how much more you can lose before you vanish completely. Yet, for all the weight of isolation, you do not surrender to it. You find purpose in small things, a basket woven tighter than the last, a wound that heals against the odds, a morning when your hands do not shake as you feed your charges. These victories are yours alone, unseen and uncelebrated, but they are real. In the end, you accept what you have become, a solitary figure moving through the world's blind spots, both feared and forgotten. Isolation, you realize, is not a sentence, but a fact. It is the shape of your life, as unyielding as the walls that surround you and the creatures you keep. You endure it as you endure in everything else, one silent, stubborn day at a time. Sometimes, late at night, you find yourself lying awake, listening to the sound of rain drumming against the roof or the whisper of wind sneaking through the cracks. In those hours, when even the snakes seem to sleep, you allow yourself to wonder what it would be like to have lived a different life. It is a habit as dangerous as it is useless, but you cannot help it. Even the most hardened heart carries the faintest ember of yearning, glowing quietly beneath layers of resignation. You imagine, just for a while, waking to warmth. The room in your dream is bright, its air scented with clean straw and baking bread, not the stale, sharp tang of snake musk and mold. There is no draft, no rattle of loose shutters. You rise from a real bed, not a pile of scavenged straw, and you stretch without feeling pain in every bone and joint. The sunlight pours in, soft and golden, and you let yourself bask in it. In these dreams, you do not perform for coins and suspicion. You have a craft, one the world values. Maybe you are a weaver, fingers nimble on the loom. Maybe a baker, dusted in flour instead of dirt. Maybe a scribe, trusted with the secrets of ink and parchment. People greet you with smiles, with honest questions, not flinches and curses. There are no whispers about you at the well. No children dared to touch your shadow. In this life, your neighbors remember your name and say it with affection. Sometimes your dreams go further. You see yourself with a friend, just one, someone who sits beside you without fear. You share meals and stories, not just scraps and silence. Once in a while, there is even the flicker of love, a hand resting in yours, a voice that calls you home, laughter that rings out without mockery or dread. You do not have to be brave or cunning or hard. You can just be. But dawn always comes, ruthless and indifferent, and the weight of your real body pulls you back into the cold and the hunger and the ache. You lie there, staring at the sagging beams above, and you remind yourself that dreams are a luxury you cannot afford. You roll out of bed, bones protesting, and set about the day's work with the slow, mechanical resignation of someone who has run out of alternatives. On rare occasions, you glimpse the life you want in the world outside. You pass a house with bright shutters and hear the sound of a family laughing around a table. You see children tumbling in the mud, their shouts full of life and promise, not the shrill edge of fear that follows you everywhere. You watch neighbors gather for a festival, passing cups and stories, and for a moment you remember that you too were once a child, that you too once believed in festivals and futures. But reality is always waiting to reclaim you. If you linger too long watching the laughter, someone notices. Eyes narrow, voices lower, bodies shift away from you. You are not part of that circle. You are a warning, a shadow at the edge. Even the dogs sense it, slinking away with tails low, unwilling to share in your loneliness. Still, you cannot completely silence hope, as much as you try. It is a stubborn thing, surviving even when it seems foolish. Some days you catch yourself imagining what might happen if you simply left, walked away from the village, from the snakes, from the memories of every slight and suspicion. You picture yourself on the road, the sun warm on your back, a new town on the horizon where no one knows your name. Perhaps in that place you could start again. Perhaps you could be someone else, someone not haunted by every look and whisper. Yet even this hope carries its own bitterness. You know the world is not kind to wanderers, especially those without coin, without skills anyone needs, without protection from the dangers that wait beyond the familiar misery of your village. You know the stories: the thief hanged at the crossroads, the beggar frozen in a ditch, the stranger beaten by guards for no reason but his strangeness. The road is freedom only for those with the strength or luck to survive it, and you are not sure you have either left. So you remain, anchored by necessity and fear as much as by routine. You let the dreams come and go, knowing they will never be anything more than that. Sometimes, when the sky is clear and the moon is high, you go outside and sit on the stoop, watching the stars, and pretend you are not trapped. You imagine that each cold point of light is a place where you could be different, where you could be new. It helps a little, but in the end, morning always arrives. You feed your snakes, count your coins, wrap yourself in your tattered cloak, and step back into the endless, grinding day. The dreams fade, replaced by the familiar weight of your burdens. Still, you tuck away a piece of each dream, hidden deep in your mind where no one can reach it. A secret warmth, faint but stubborn, that keeps you moving forward when there is nothing else left. This, too, is a kind of survival, not hope exactly, not joy, but the refusal to let the world have everything, the stubborn insistence on wanting something more, even if you know you will never have it. And for a moment, just for a moment, it is almost enough. In the end, it is not the fear, the hunger, or the aching loneliness that defeats you. It is not even the scorn of your neighbors or the daily brush with danger as you coax another angry serpent from its cage for the meager amusement of a crowd that will never see you as more than a spectacle. No, what truly endures is the relentless monotony, the dull cycle of repetition that fills every waking hour and stretches, gray and unbroken, from one cold dawn to the next. You rise, as always, before the sun, wrapped in blankets that never quite manage to chase away the chill. You eat whatever you have, a handful of crumbs, a few sips of thin broth, and check your snakes, whispering your grim little litany of warnings and half threats. Each movement is mechanical, each task familiar to the point of numbness. The world outside your door is always the same. The stench of mud and dung, the distant shouts of traders and farmers, the endless procession of tired, wary faces. There are days when your hands shake so badly with fatigue and hunger that you nearly drop a basket. Days when the crowd is thinner than usual, when even the children are too hungry or too frightened to linger at the edge of your makeshift stage. Days when a constable's shadow falls across you and you brace yourself for his other pointless fine, another half hearted accusation. On those days, you wonder how you have managed to last as long as you have, why you continue to choose another day of this over the oblivion that waits, patient and undemanding, just a few steps away. Yet you do go on. There is a kind of defiant pride in it, a knowledge that, for all their suspicion and scorn, the villagers need you in their own grim way. When a rat infests a cellar, when a snake startles a child, when superstition or simple boredom needs a target, you are called for, muttered about, watched. You are their necessary evil, their reminder that life, like a snake, is unpredictable, potentially deadly, and impossible to control. You learn to read the seasons in the crowd's mood, the restlessness of spring, the lethargy of summer, the desperate tension of autumn as food runs thin, and the bitter, resigned huddling of winter. You watch as faces change, children grow, adults wither, the old vanish quietly from their corners. Through it all, you remain, your place as fixed as the market stocks or the church's bell tower. People leave, people die, but the snake charmer endures. If there is comfort in this, it is a cold one. You do not expect joy, but there are moments, brief, unexpected, when you feel something that is almost its echo. A child, braver than most, dares to touch a snake's cool scales and grins up at you, wide eyed and delighted. An old woman, her hands twisted by age, thanks you for chasing away a rat, her voice so soft you can barely hear it. A rare, quiet day when the snakes are calm, the bread is fresh, and the sun, against all odds, breaks through the cloud for a fleeting hour. You hoard these moments the way the others hoard coins or memories of better days. They do not redeem the life you live, but they make it bearable, make it possible to endure one more cycle of rising and sleeping, feeding and fearing, hoping and being disappointed. Every night you return to your hovel, the day's coins clinking with a faint, hollow pride. You secure your snakes, bolt your door, and patch your meager bedding. You tell yourself that tomorrow will be much the same, and you are almost always right. Sometimes you allow yourself the smallest of luxuries, a story told to the snakes as you feed them, a memory of something soft or sweet from a childhood so distant you wonder if it was yours at all. In this way, your life unfolds, endlessly grim, endlessly real, but somehow not entirely without meaning. The world does not care if you are happy or even if you survive. It does not owe you kindness or understanding, but each day you endure is a victory, however minor, against the weight of everything that seeks to grind you down. You do not sing songs, but sometimes you hum quietly beneath your breath. The tune is for you alone. There will be no legacy, no legend, only the stubborn presence of someone who, in spite of everything, refused to disappear. So you sleep and wake and live on. You, the snake charmer, feared, ignored, forgotten by most, remembered only as a shadow in the muddy square, yet still here with your scars, your hunger, and your battered pride. Tomorrow and the day after that, and all the dull, dangerous days to come, life goes on. And so, somehow, do you.